the difference between a strong and informed opinion and a merely strong opinion is remarkable, isn't it? And important to track. But I have neither. I don't think I could be much better informed. I don't think there is a sort of trove of information that has been unaccessed by us. I am, for example, well aware of interventions in this space made previously by members of the government, up to and including Keir Starmer, not to mention David Lammy, both lawyers by training and both adamant in the past that jury service was a sort of a sacred cow, an unslayable principle that nobody should ever dare to meddle with. And both of them now, Lammy in particular, apparently comfortable with the idea of jury trials being denied to a rather large cohort of the accused. I tell you how boring I am. I tried to read Magna Carta on a couple of occasions, and I am aware of two things. Trial by jury was a democratic principle enshrined in that document, but also it wouldn't have applied to the likes of you and me. Don't kid yourself. Magna Carta was chiefly about limiting the power of the monarch over the barons. It had very little to do with Joe Schmo or the man on the Clapham ox cart. Quite the opposite, in fact. But again, it is something that has always been there. It would have, I think, felt a little like well, that old analogy about getting the eggs out of a baked cake might have applied to jury trials once. If you were thinking about the legal system and somebody said, we're going to take away trial by jury, you'd have said, that's like trying to get the eggs out of a baked cake. And yet, of course, it isn't. It's a relatively straightforward process under which thousands of cases will become judge-only trials. Burglary, fraud, drug dealing, and similar are now set to become judge-only trials. Nearly 80,000 cases currently caught up in the backlog. Justice delayed is famously justice denied, and David Lammy is expected to announce today that the right to trial by jury will go in either way cases, i.e. cases where defendants are given the choice to have their cases heard in a magistrates court or a Crown Court. I suppose one way into this is to wonder why you would opt for a Crown Court, if not because you believe you have a better chance of a favourable verdict, or you want to prolong the agony of your victim in ways that you couldn't do if you went to magistrates court. There were about 13,000 of these cases last year that actually went before juries, so you'd be taking away that right from between 10 and 20,000 accused, and instead the case would be heard by a single judge. Brian Levison's recommendation, and he was charged by the government with looking into ways to reduce this backlog, was that they should be heard by a judge and two magistrates. But they've done away with that. And he's rode back slightly from some of the other cases that would have been filed under this. They would have taken away an automatic right to trial by jury under some of the early plans that were seen, but as it stands, unless there is a big surprise, a big rabbit pulled out of a big hat come 12:30 today, it will be either way cases where you can currently opt either for a magistrates court or a jury, a Crown Court trial, and you will have that right taken away. So 11 minutes after 10 is the time. I'm conscious also of this being a question I've asked you a couple of times already, and other presenters as well have been nibbling at the same nuggets. But I still want to hear more from you. I really do. I found it slightly inspiring yesterday, albeit that it was a very sad moment, but to be reminded of what Brian did to this genre of radio, to be reminded of the importance of actually engaging with what people say, asking them to explain themselves. So lawyers, we haven't heard enough from lawyers yet on this question. Would I be betraying a confidence if I told you about a little chat that John Cleese and I just had in the is it called the airlock, Keith? That room outside? Do we call it the airlock? I mean, to be honest, my day's already peaked. I don't know what you're going to have to bring to the table in order to top the fact that I just made John Cleese laugh. That's up there. That's kind of things that I miss my dad when things like that happen, because I'd have rung him straight after the show and say, Dad, I just made John Cleese laugh at a joke. But we were discussing the fact that lawyers are not necessarily the most reliable people to whom we should turn at a time when their own livelihood is being somewhat curtailed. So a trial before a single judge is going to offer up, I would have thought, a lot fewer billable hours for barristers, if not solicitors, than a trial before a jury. I could be wrong about that. 0345 6060973. But I don't think that there is necessarily a lot of room for dispute on the observation that if your meter is running, the comparison you might draw would be with black cab drivers, to whom I bow to nobody in my admiration of. But if the meter is running, and I'm very glad that the black cab drivers of London always resist this temptation, but if the meter is running, the temptation to take a little bit longer to get to your destination than you would if you were being paid a flat fee must sometimes be close to irresistible. So we'll get lawyers up as well, 0345 6060973. Do we worry about racism? I think that dreadful woman who hates seeing brown people in adverts was a magistrate for a while, although she got into a little bit of bother during that period of her so-called career. If you were to find yourself in front of somebody like that as a person of colour, you could rightfully fear for fairness. Would that extend into the judiciary from the realms of magistrates, who are, of course, by definition, civilians, into the realms of professional jurists and judges? I don't know. You tell me. I'm white. As a black man, would you worry about not getting the chance to go in front of a jury? Because even if you've got a racist juror or three, you've got 9 who would be pushing back against their obvious prejudice and bigotry. Then we have the jurors themselves. I don't know how important this is. I kind of oscillate, depending on the question, between valuing lived experience over mere opinion. And then sometimes, of course, expertise is mere opinion and it trumps lived experience. People, if you need proof of why lived experience isn't the gold standard of conversation, you will often encounter people who don't believe that colds exist because they've never had a cold. I'm reaching a little with that, but you understand what I mean. Something has never happened to them, therefore it can't be real. Similarly, lived experience of knowing someone who knows 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 someone who's ripping off the benefit system is not necessarily proof that everybody is. Although, of course, you could get a column in most national newspapers making precisely that point in slightly more flowery language. So lived experience is not the trump card in all conversations, but it is in many. And I wonder whether your experience as a juror leaves you worried about the abolition of many, many juries, or actually rather warm towards the idea. I wonder how long I can get through without mentioning the person that I have all year mentioned whenever we turn our attention to juries. And technically, I haven't mentioned them yet. I've alluded to them. That's not the same thing at all. Maybe need a trial by jury to decide whether or not I'm telling the truth. So lawyers, jurors, punters, potential defendants can all bring personal perspectives, lived experience style perspectives to the table. 0345 6060973. What about the rest of us? What about the rest of us? Well, we're still in the weeds of the philosophy of it, the kind of democratic principles, the idea that being judged by a jury, being scrutinised by a jury of our peers, is something valuable that is in need of passionate protection. And I am not feeling that still in the way that I expected to. I'm really not. It could be because I had such a strange experience. The one thing I did take away from my experience of jury service, even though I never got on a jury despite sitting for 2 weeks in Isleworth, was that the people running it, the clerks of the court or the sort of civil servants, 2 ladies in particular at Isleworth, were among the most consummate professionals I've ever had the pleasure of seeing in action. The way they juggled the stresses of the role, the appalling, the extraordinary logistics, the timings, some people turning up late, some people disappearing, having trying to get 12 juries together several times a day, often at the drop of a hat, discharging them. The logistical nightmare that they navigated was an absolute inspiration to behold. And it took away a lot of my confusion about why the system can seem so sclerotic and so slow. I'll tell you why much of the judicial system is so sclerotic and so slow, shall I? Would you like to know why? You might want to write this down. Because it's full of people. It's full of people, and the more full of people something is, the harder it is to get organised. Like nailing jelly to a wall or herding cats. There must have been hundreds of people in the building where I did my jury service, and there were essentially 2 women and their colleagues charged with keeping us all in order, making sure we were all in the bits that we were supposed to be in, that they had 12 jurors ready to sit in judgment on a case, and that there was no room for quibbling, complaining or miscarriages of justice. And some of those juries were going to be there for weeks, and they even handled that fairly very professionally. Schemes and systems in place to minimise the slowness and the danger. Will you be surprised how many people have allowed their experience of watching The Traitors influence their opinions regarding jury service? An awful lot of people who might once have been passionate defenders of jury service watched the last series of The Traitors and have come away convinced that it's an absolutely daft thing to do, to entrust the fate of people into the hands of their peers, of 12 good men and women and true. Thousands of cases to be judge-only trials. What is your personally informed perspective on that? Your experiences as a judge, perhaps, although I don't think we'll get many calls from them. A juror. We've had former judges on, haven't we, I think, on other subjects. I can't remember whether... I think we've had one on this subject as well, certainly former magistrates. So a judge, a jurist, a lawyer, of course, and a defendant or a potential defendant, which, of course, encompasses pretty much all of us. And then on the more philosophical side of things, the question of what exactly is it that we're supposed to be so fearful of losing?